Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. We'll start with a check of the top headlines this hour. Trump says Venezuela will turn up to 50 million barrels of oil. U.S. crude futures fell 1.3% to $56.39 per barrel after the announcement. White House says U.S. discussed a range of options to acquire Greenland, including use of military. Trump says he has a good relationship with Indian Prime Minister Modi, but he highlighted Modi's displeasure over 50% U.S. tariffs on Indian-linked Russian oil purchases. China says U.S. actions dealt blow to Venezuela economic and social order, threatened stability of global production industry chain. Reports suggest the deceased Hindu journalist Rana Pratap Bairagi, who was shot dead in Bangladesh, had been paying protection money for months. A Saudi-led coalition says that it had undertaken limited preemptive strikes in Yemen to stop UAE-backed secessionists from escalating the conflict. China is reviewing Meta's $2 billion purchase of AI firm Manus over possible technology export control issues, a move that could give Beijing leverage over the deal. NVIDIA CEO confirms that China won't make any formal announcement about approving imports of NVIDIA's H200 chips. All right, viewers, let's start with the top focus here. Now, Russia has deployed Navy assets to escort an oil tanker, which is also being pursued by U.S. forces across the Atlantic. The ship, which currently isn't carrying anything, historically has transported Venezuelan crude oil and was thought to be between Scotland and Iceland. The U.S. Coast Guard tried to board the ship Bella 1 last month in the Caribbean when it was believed to be heading towards Venezuela. It had a warrant to seize the ship, which was accused of breaking U.S. sanctions and shipping Iranian oil. It then dramatically changed course as well as its name to Marinera, reportedly reflagging from a Guyanese to a Russian vessel. All right, joining me in this discussion is Dr. Gilbert Doctorow, who's a Russian affairs expert from Brussels. Thank you very much, Dr. Doctorow. Please do start with your comments on this first.
Regrettably, it appears to me that Donald Trump has made a deal with the deep state, that Donald Trump's vision of the future global order has been subverted by these power ministries, the CIA, the Defense, or now War Ministry, or War Department, and so forth. The result is that they are now, the United States is now undertaking very risky attacks on Russian assets. And this attempt to take over a boat which has now flagged itself as Russian is a case in point. We are risking a major escalation at many different points of the world as the hubristic people in these power ministries feel the strength of their control over Donald Trump, who has now become just a mouthpiece for their actions. And their actions are not consonant with the newly published National Security Strategy document of 3 weeks ago, which was looking towards a United States that is a leading member of the Board of Governors of the world, but not a hegemon. Well, we're back to hegemony, worldwide hegemony, and let's not be confused by what's going on in Venezuela. That is not just to control the Western Hemisphere. The deep state wants to control the world. And what you see now in this very risky attack on a Russian tanker is this belief that Washington can reassert its control over the whole world, including dictating to Russia.
Well, Dr. Doctor, do you think this will also have any bearing on the peace dialogue on Ukraine?
there is no longer a peace dialogue on Ukraine. The Russians have not publicly denounced Trump. They've been very cautious. They have kept their cards to themselves. But it is inconceivable that these peace talks will proceed or even take place again now that Trump has shown his cards. Now that it's clear that he is looking for global hegemony and is not capable of negotiating with the Russians as an honest broker.
Would you in fact say that he has already been able to establish hegemony with the military action in Venezuela?
I think he's gone very far. Many of my colleagues in the alternative media have been speaking and have had lurid headings to their videos on YouTube saying that NATO is dead, that the European Union is dead, that the United States hegemony is dead. All dead wrong. The United States under the present configuration in Washington, where, as I say, Donald Trump is now a handmaiden to the power ministries who are the deep state. In this new configuration, Donald Trump is making a very determined effort to maintain and establish hegemony, and is he going much farther than his predecessors? So, the attack on Venezuela, the pending attack on Greenland, the pending attack on Iran are all proof that the people whom we call neocons are now in control of U.S. foreign and military policy.
All right, sure. Thanks, Doctor, for your comments there, but I request you to stay on as we gather some more inputs as far as the Russia-Ukraine war is concerned. Viewers, let's tell you that Russia is now saying its air defense systems shot down hundreds of Ukrainian drones along with aerial bombs and US-made HIMARS rockets across the conflict zone and beyond. Moscow claims strikes were carried out on Ukrainian drone storage facilities and temporary troop deployment points across more than 150 locations. Russian authorities also reported intercepting drones over central Russia's Kostroma Oblast and over the Black Sea. Ukraine, meanwhile, says its forces carried out attacks on Russian targets, including a military arsenal in Kostroma. Kyiv says the site is used for ammunition storage, missile support and technical maintenance. Ukraine also reported nearly 200 combat engagements along the front lines, underscoring the scale of the ongoing fighting. I request Dr. Doctorate to join me back in the discussion here. Doctor, do you see the attacks and counter-attacks increasing between the two nations at this point in time? Because clearly there is no rule of law that's being followed by the international community.
Well, you're speaking primarily of drone attacks. And the war between Russia and Ukraine has evolved substantially since it started in February 2022. It is now, yes, it remains an artillery war. Yes, it remains a war in which aerial bombardment from Russian jets is an important consideration. But the real essence of the battle is now in drones. And the Ukrainians are inventive, they're talented, they have a long history of military production, they were a major source of military hardware for the Soviet Union, and they are quite adept both at creating their own drones and in making use of drones that they receive from their Western allies. So it is very instructive that you mention the level of attacks that the Ukrainians are making on Russian military and civilian targets, reaching very far into the Russian Federation, well over 1,000 kilometers. And that makes the point that this is a really tough war. Again, many of my colleagues in the alternative media are speaking as if the war is over. That the well-known Jeffrey Sachs has been appearing in venues all over the place, saying the war has been won. It's not won. The war is going on. Ukraine is a tough nation. It is resistant in the same way that its fellow Slavs, the Russians, are resisting and defending what they consider to be their national interest. And the war will be over when Russia takes all of Ukrainian territory up to the Dnieper. Won't go beyond, but it will go to the Dnieper.
Okay,
So
but
we
let's
have some
also
months
take
to go.
into account the fact that it's for the first time that US has assured security guarantees along with European Union in the meeting that was last held. Why do you think, why do you think
I dispute that. I dispute that, and I don't stand by myself. Politico today has come out with a statement that Witkoff never signed that declaration that was reached in Paris yesterday.
Okay.
And the Russians were saying yesterday, Gazeta Ru, which is the leading newspaper, which can be called the voice of the Kremlin, was saying in their latest issue that this is completely phony, that there was never
So
American
was it just an
assured
eyewash?
backing. Sorry?
Was it just an eyewash by the US?
It's a propaganda move. The whole exercise in Paris yesterday was a PR exercise. It was picked up by major mainstream news outlets like the Financial Times, like Euronews. They're speaking of it as if Ukraine now has full American backing for the security guarantees. That is not true. The documents were not signed by Witkoff, and the United States just was an observer. It was not a participant. But that is almost irrelevant. The Russians absolutely refused to accept what would be, in normal language, considered to be capitulation terms dictated by the loser in the battle, Ukraine and its backers, against the winner in the fight, the Russians. That is not discussable.
All right. Thank you very much, Doctor, for your comments here. And moving ahead now, viewers, let's cover some news on Yemen. Now, Yemen's Transport Ministry has condemned the newly imposed Saudi flight restrictions, denouncing the requirement for aircraft to halt in Saudi Arabia for security checks as an air blockade that violates and undermines Yemen's national sovereignty. According to reports, the Southern Transitional Council has refused to comply with the new protocols mandated by Yemen's Saudi-backed central government, leading to a partial suspension of operations at Aden International Airport, the country's main international gateway. However, Yemen's separatists have urged Saudi Arabia to halt its airstrikes and said that their leader was still in Aden after a Saudi-led coalition accused him of fleeing to an unknown location. Aidaros al-Zubaydi, whose forces captured large areas last month only to have them reclaimed by his Saudi-backed opponents, was unable to travel to Riyadh for negotiations and was subsequently dismissed from the government, even as a Saudi-led coalition carried out airstrikes on its home province. Meanwhile, Yemen's southern separatists announced that they had lost contact with the delegation sent to Riyadh for talks and called on Saudi authorities to ensure the delegation's safety following a night of Saudi airstrikes in Yemen. The STC Council issued a statement demanding that Saudi authorities guarantee the safety of its delegation currently in Riyadh. Alright, viewers, now moving ahead, China has announced punitive actions against 3 Taiwanese nationals for what it calls involvement in Taiwan independence activities. Beijing says one of those named will be held accountable for life for acting as an accomplice in separatist efforts. Authorities have also imposed sweeping travel restrictions on the other 2 individuals and their immediate family members, barring them from entering mainland China as well as Hong Kong and Macau. China's Taiwan Affairs Office said the measures target only a small number of independence supporters and are not directed at the wider Taiwanese public. Beijing maintains the actions are meant to safeguard national sovereignty and territorial integrity. Let's listen in.
大陆方面依据有关法律法规，决定将刘世芳、郑英耀列入台独顽固分子清单，并实施制裁，禁止刘郑及其亲属进入大陆及香港、澳门特别行政区，限制刘郑的关联机构与大陆有关组织、个人进行合作，绝不允许其 关联企业和金主在大陆牟利，并将采取其他一切必要的惩治措施，依法终身追责。
All right, now joining me in this discussion is Collins Chonyukit, who's Foreign Affairs, Security and Strategy Analyst from Kuala Lumpur. Thanks, Collins, for joining me in this discussion. Collins, first of all, do take us through who these three individuals are and if they were affiliated to any particular organization.
Well, it is a delicate situation. We have seen how the the STC now is openly challenging Saudi actions, and these separatists calling for Saudi to halt airstrikes. It signals that there's this rising mistrust and a shift from negotiations to confrontation. And of course, also we have seen these factions, and they raise serious concerns about safety, transparency, in terms of also of course trust in the talks. And so when talks collapse, there's this risk of actors reverting back to military moves on the ground, and this will also potentially draw in again the southern factions into a wider confrontation. So we've seen how this whole connotation between the separatists in Yemen and Saudi Arabia, and it will also implicate greater escalations and the risk in Yemen, where it's now drifting back towards fragmentation, instability, and with growing, of course, also on humanitarian and political risks, which will have profound implications both for Yemen and for Saudi Arabia as a whole.
All right, and what do you think about the larger plan of action for China as far as Taiwan is now concerned? Put this in context of the US military action in Taiwan. Will this bolster China to assert its authority on Taiwan?
Well, we have seen that this is the time for Beijing to act tough for both the domestic audience in China, and also as a stark warning to Taiwan, that independence is not being tolerated, and that this reinforces the narrative that Beijing is defending its own territorial integrity, territorial rights. Is treating this as a strict internal matter of China, and this is to appeal to domestic Chinese nationalists, but to Taiwan's political opponents, it is to signal that there will be consequences, there will be repercussions if there's any intent or movement towards a pro-independence advocacy, and this is the result of these actions, and but of course it can backfire heavily. It can even galvanize the Taiwanese public opinion and galvanize support within Taiwan for even greater defense of its own democratic self-determination. So we have seen how these consolidated, synergized efforts by Beijing, from the blockade to the encirclement to the grey zone tactics, coercions, of course also with this recent move to of course to impose these travel bans and an escalatory move by Beijing, and of course, as I've stated, it will have potential backfiring complications for Beijing as well. And again, this is yet another move to appeal to domestic audience, as well as a stark warning to Taiwan, to Japan, and of course also to Washington.
All right. Well, thanks for your opinion there, Collins, but I request you to stay on with me. Viewers, Yemen's Transport Ministry has now condemned the newly imposed Saudi flight restrictions, denouncing the requirement for aircraft to halt in Saudi Arabia for security checks as an air blockade that violates and undermines Yemen's national sovereignty. According to reports, the STC has refused to comply with the new protocols mandated by Yemen's Saudi-backed central government, leading to a partial suspension of operations at Aden International Airport. I request Collins to join me back in this with his comments.
Yes, we have seen how this crisis also reflects a very divergent Gulf strategies in Yemen. Saudi Arabia is prioritizing on central control and stability, but of course the UAE has long supported the need for southern autonomy mechanism and structure. So this fractured front ultimately will benefit the Houthis, who will ultimately gain some leverage in space as the rebels fight one another. So if this continues, then we can expect the weakening of anti-Houthi coordination, fragmentized segment for local security actors, and of course also we have this greater risks and uncertainties and instabilities in all initiatives for peace. So the bigger picture is that Yemen is now risking to slip back, to drift back into this notion of a multi-front fragmentation, instabilities, and it's not just it's no longer a two-sided war. So these are the risks that will again have this the potential to have wider implications for the region, especially also for Saudi Arabia and for UAE, and of course for Yemen as a whole.
All right, thanks Collins for your comments there, and with that we now viewers move on. Now let's get you some technology news. Now Meta is pausing the international rollout of its Ray-Ban display smart glasses due to strong demand and limited supply in the US. The company had planned to launch the augmented reality eyewear in the UK, France, Italy and Canada this year. Meta says it will prioritize US orders with reevaluating its international strategy, citing waitlists extending well into 2026. The glasses developed with the Isolorux Tika, which allows users to take photos, stream content and interact with an AI assistant. At the CES Tech Show in Las Vegas, Meta also announced new features including a teleprompter function and expanded pedestrian navigation to 32 cities across the US. And moving on now, India's Minister of External Affairs says that he is concerned for safety of the people of Venezuela following US strikes and the subsequent capture of the country's leader Nicolas Maduro. He also urged all parties involved to sit down and sort out a position which is in the interest of the well-being and safety of the people of Venezuela. Donald Trump's decision to attack Venezuela, arrest its president and temporarily run the country marks a striking departure for a politician who long criticized others for overreaching on foreign affairs and vowed to avoid foreign entanglements. Let's listen into that statement by S. Jaishankar, the External Affairs Minister of India.
That yes, we are concerned at the developments, but we would really urge all the parties involved to now sit down and come to a position which is in the interest of the well-being and the safety of the people of Venezuela. Because at the end of the day, that is our concern. That we would want Venezuela, the country with whom over many years we've had very good relations. So we would like the people to come out well from whatever is the direction of events.
All right, viewers, that's a wrap on this edition of the World Report. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.